That sound marks the beginning of a fight, one that will no doubt take years to win. Controlling exotic species such as Australian pine is a monumental undertaking, but it's a challenge that must be met for Florida's native ecosystem and the wildlife that depend on it.
They're a very invasive exotic species. They come into areas, they're very adaptable, they can grow in a variety of different habitat types and conditions, and they outcompete the native vegetation. The native vegetation is not used to dealing with this exotic species, and for some reason these plants such as Brazilian peppers and Australian pines have a competitive edge on our native species. They essentially push them right out and take over the area.
In South Florida, Melaleuca is a nightmare, where it is estimated to be spreading at a rate of 50 acres per day. Here at Emmy Thompson State Park near Miami, this rapidly growing exotic has invaded a large area of the park's 640 acres.
Over time, the Melaleucas came in and created almost a forested wetland, as opposed to an open glade. So you lose all those wildlife species that need that open marsh area to forage. Some good examples are your snail kites and a lot of your herons and egrets that really want to have the open areas.
This is a fern known as Old World climbing fern. The botanical name is Lygodium microphyllum. This plant was brought into Florida in the early 1900s, probably into the nursery trade. It's really a quite pretty plant, as you can see. Once the climbing fern gets to a suitable habitat, which typically is wet collars on the bases of trees, such as cypress trees. It will come in and colonize into Everglades tree islands, cypress heads, and it will climb the trees, physically smother them out. But another problem is that it burns very readily.
It's hard to convince people that something green is bad, and so they don't see the real threat. It creeps slowly. It's not a smokestack spewing smoke or garbage floating in a waterway. It's green. It looks like it should be there, and so most people don't understand it. I think the media's done a good job of running this issue, but in general, people don't understand the seriousness of the threat, and it's really one of the worst forms of pollution in that it continues to spread on its own. Instead of, you can stop a smokestack from spewing smoke, but you can't stop an exotic plant from growing.
So one of the really important efforts that we need through IFAS, through the Extension Service, is to help educate the public as to what the problem is with invasive plants. Try to educate people what plants are the major problems, because a lot of people may have these plants actually in their own yards on their own private property. And if we're spending a lot of tax dollars to control these plants on public property, the next step, of course, is to try to control them on private property, because if we're controlling them on one side of the fence and not on the other, it's just going to be a continuous battle as they come across the fence. A pest plant is different to different people. If you have a front lawn and you want to find turf in it, a broadleaf weed is a pest plant in that situation. If you're a farmer and you're growing vegetables, any weed that competes with your crop would be a pest plant. In the case of land managers who are managing public lands, mainly as natural areas, to keep them in as pristine a condition as possible with good native vegetation communities, these pest plants are ones that are able to come into these natural areas and displace the native plant communities. We're still bringing new species into the country, and we don't always know what their invasive potential is going to be. We're bringing plants in as ornamentals, and many of them are the plants that we bring in are very important ornamental commodities. Some of these may have the potential to be invasive and be problems. So, we're kind of faced with making decisions on how we want to deal with this problem. You know, one thing that we can do is continue to bring plants in, regardless of whether there are going to be problems or not, and just continue to develop management programs for them. The other thing that we might be able to do is learn how to look at these plants a little bit more carefully and determine which ones will cause more problems than they're worth bringing in. People tend to understand monetary costs, but we need to change our mindset a little bit when we think of the cost incurred by Lygodium and other invasive species, and that it is a cost to the natural environment that we can't even put dollars and cents values on.
The deadly fire ant, never known in the U.S. until it came here aboard a boat from South America. Today, Orange County, California becomes the latest force to take action against what's literally now being called an invasion. Chicago cutting down trees this week to slow another invasion. Asian longhorn beetles got here from China, burrowed in wood products.
It's just, devastating to our neighborhood, to see all these wonderful trees being cut down.
The beetle worked its way to Chicago after destroying 2,000 trees in New York, and now threatens woodlands vital to the maple syrup industry. Today, the government warned that thousands of alien bugs and plants arriving here from foreign countries are taking over broad areas of the U.S., destroying food supplies, clogging waterways, upsetting our ecosystems, and costing our economy billions. Sometimes it's through airports the invaders arrive, sometimes in water dumped from the holds of foreign ships, according to Interior Secretary Bruce Babbitt today.
There has been a documented incidence of cholera coming in through ballast water in the seaport of New Orleans. That has obvious implications for seafood.
It's water from another ship that unleashed the foreign zebra mussel in the Great Lakes, spread to the Mississippi, too, jamming pipes and shutting down power plants. In a few years, damage could reach $5 billion. In Florida, a species of tree brought here by one person from Australia has spread, now gobbling up 50 acres of precious Everglades each day. And in California, it's not just fire ants, it's the mitten crab from China, too. Environmentalist Bill Jennings.
They introduce diseases and parasites into the Bay Delta. It's an economic and biological disaster.
Today, federal officials said they'll try to combat all this, but it may be too late. Bio-intruders from abroad are at large, and the forces of nature may prove too powerful to be reversed. Robert Hager, NBC News, Washington.
Future. I see a future in which the diversity of life has been choked off, crowded out by a few alien species: blackberries, Scotch broom, Norway rats, starlings. Humans have invaded every continent, every chain of mountains, every island on this planet. And everywhere they go, they bring these biological bulldozers. We were given a garden. But have we acted like good gardeners? No. The garden is choked with weeds. So we poison the weeds. What happens to the garden?